Okay, welcome to part four of the Ada Limon. I'm going to be looking at, in your first essay, we'll be covering imagery in an Ada Limon poem. My paper is talking about imagery and line break because that's what I'm working with in my other course. So, and I think they do work together. However, I'm with you. I'm more interested in how you handle a discussion of imagery. So let's just, before we even begin looking at the paper that I'm working on in the poem, I'd like to go ahead and think about, we want to think about the image as being something that our sensory experiences deal with, right? So it's not an idea, it's not an abstraction, it's a literal thing in the world. So that's what I'm going to be looking at, and I'm going to show you a few things that'll help you understand the process by which I arrive at these things. Then I'll show you my essay that I'm working on, work your way through it a little bit. I hope that this is helpful. Please, again, let me know if it is, and if there's something else would make this more helpful. Also, I'm always interested to hear that. So I'm going to go ahead and share. Before I share my screen with you, actually, I'm going to show you some of my annotations that I did and talk you through a little bit about what I have. So this is my copyright of the poem, We Are Surprised. The first thing I did is I went in and I tried to mark all the things that I think are images. Okay, you're still learning this, so don't be too stressed, right? Find some. She's a very imagistic writer, so whatever seems obvious to, write those down. Then I came over here and I wrote them all down in the order that they appear. And then I kind of looked at those and I tried to think about what did that mean to me, that order of them. And I came up with moon, middle brain, look, roadside, stray cats, faces, and to run. So I look at these as a whole, and the first thing that I see is that look, roadside, stray cats, faces, and run. All of those to me, and really moon, middle, and brain, none of these words are outrageous. None of these are super surprising. They don't necessarily require me to go look anything up. I know exactly what all of these things are as soon as I read them, right? These are very common words, very common images. So she's not surprising me in that way. Even though, of course, the poem is We Are Surprised, but it's not surprising in a linguistic sense, right? So what it does come up with, though, is that she's using conversational vernacular, but using them in a different way, because this next thing I did is I boxed around the words moon, middle, brain, and in the sentence it reads, and this is the second stanza, and it reads now we take the moon into the middle of our brains. And that is interesting to me because that's not a literal thing. That's the next thing I wrote down was isn't literal. So I think that this is where the poem, its understanding of imagery, can start to have a discussion. Because really I have a question about, like, what does it mean to take the moon into the middle of your brains? And I don't really have an answer for it, so I have to work my way into an answer. So I'm going to trust that my question is going to lead me to something that's at least interesting to discover, because if I'm discovering it as I'm writing it, that means that, like, at least I'm writing something that maybe a reader will find interesting. I'm not just like spewing something I think I already know. So I want to share with you the paragraph that I've been working on this particular section of the poem. So we get to here. I've shown you the first two in this one, and I started with a poem breakdown in terms of imagery. I'm looking at surrealism. Remember, with that, I haven't really talked about that much. I may end up cutting that. I may find a better word. That was just a good entryway into this. So if you'll notice, one of the things I'm doing here is I'm starting on the first sentence. So the question that I think this raises is, in your papers and in any kind of close reading, do you have to start with the first sentence of a document or a poem or something? No, you don't. You can start on the fourth sentence and start your first paragraph there if you tell me why that's an important thing, right? You just have to let me know, and a summary paragraph tells me that you understand the poem as a whole. So same thing with this summary paragraph. By starting on the first sentence, one thing that I leave myself open for in an academic essay is, did I just not really understand the end of the poem? So I'm just talking about the front of it, right? So I want to clarify to my reader that, look, I get the poem, I understand what it's doing, but I think the value is starting at the beginning and then working my way through the whole thing. So I hope that makes sense. So I started the first sentence of the poem because that's the one that contains the image that I felt most drawn to at the beginning of this particular poem, and really kind of sort of the whole thing, I think, is in that space. So anyway, the first sentence of the poem, by utilizing a surreal act and image from the first stanza, right? And that this isn't perfect, right? within the first stanza, sets the poem into a space of imaginative possibilities. I don't love this, but it's an okay topic sentence. I kind of know what I'm going to talk about. Like if I'm going to read that, I understand that I'm going to talk about surreal act, I'm going to talk about image, and I'm going to talk about a space of imaginative possibilities. So it's a little bit loose right now, but I'm giving my reader something to think about. So then I try to do this. This is really common for me, is that I say a thing, and in my next sentence, I try to clarify what I said. So in my revision, I'm probably going to cut most of this and just try to get to this point first, because this is obviously where I'm doing my better thinking, because I've already done a little bit of work, which is the value of doing revision on your major papers, right? So a lot of you will turn in the first draft of your essay. You may have done some clearing up of grammar and sentence structure, but sometimes it's this kind of larger edit to recognize that, this isn't my best sentence yet, so I want to work on this one. So the poem guides us, and so I look at this. This is the verb I want to use here because I'm using it here, right? So I'm drawing in this moment my reader's attention to the fact that I know what I'm doing. I'm being careful. I'm using the same language throughout the paper, creating a cohesive argument as I go forward. The poem guides us into a setting that we cannot read strictly as literal. Now, so I make a claim, and now I'm going to give you the quote, right? Inside of your papers, I'm always looking for these right here. I'm looking for the quotes coming directly from the text. So when you're writing in your poem breakdown paragraph and paragraphs, you want to make sure you are pulling language directly from the poem and putting it into your paper, because this is going to let us talk about what cherry picking is, which is our next step in terms of critical analysis. I'm putting my parenthetical citation. Notice it's just open parentheses, author's last name, no comma, page number, close parentheses, and the period goes on the outside. Just normal stuff. Do it every time. You'll be safe. The poem begins in the present tense, now, and the comma following it, because of its grammatical correctness, it belongs there. A sentence follows the rules of grammar, places emphasis on two different ideas. One, the present moment matters, and two, the poem will follow grammatical rules. Okay, so this is just kind of this isn't really talking about image right here, so does it really belong in this paragraph? Maybe not. But I think it's important to know, could I cut that and still keep most of what I have here and it will make sense? Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, I probably should cut that. I just thought it was an interesting idea. Doesn't really fit in with my paragraph, so I may have to find another place for that. I may have to cut it entirely. The following image, so notice what I'm doing here. I'm taking a longer quote, and then I am trying to cut it down to a little bit more, right? Just to take the moon into the middle of our brains cannot be read as following logical rules. There is no instance where one can simply pluck from the cosmos the orbiting rock of our moon and place it literally into the middle of a brain. So I might actually here take this to take so that I can use the actual language of the poem, right? And I can talk about take as an almost act, right? You take, so that seems interesting. There's different verbs for that. So I'm probably going to look at this later. From the cosmos, orbiting rock of our moon, and place it literally into the middle of our brain. But this is what I'm trying to get at. You can't do it literally, so we have to read it more imaginatively. If such a place could even exist. Instead, the image requires interpretation in a metaphorical sense. It invites questions such as, what does the moon represent? What is exactly the middle of the brain? And while that information could lead down a difficult path of interpretive misinformation, I would prefer to think about the holistic effect of the image throughout the sentence. So basically what I'm saying is yes, we can sit here and talk about what is the metaphor of the moon, what's the metaphor of the brain, what's the metaphor of the middle. We can do all of that, and I think that could be an important bit of work, but I actually want to just kind of look at the whole image and see if I can't come up with a larger reading. So once the moon appears in the middle of their brains, they become like roadside stray cats with bright flashlight white eyes in our faces. Again, I'm pulling quotes down in this way. Now, I'm not doing a super great job in analyzing this right now because I want to pull individual words down and really look at them. But I want to talk about this. This is the image I want to arrive at. The only way that the characters in the poem could have their eyes light up in such a fashion, just the only way they could fit anything, which is the entirety of the moon, into the middle of their brains, is if they had found some way, or some way had found them, of making that space hollowed out. And the reason I want to get to this, so what I'm saying here in this image is that I'm going to spend more time in the next draft, right? And I can do that even here if I have the time in this, which I'm running short on. But the only way that they could have their faces light up like this, right? So that the image is from behind to the front, is if they could put the moon into their brain, right? Like a lantern. And then because there's nothing in there, it would then make lights shine up like these roadside stray cats. So the only possible way that they can do this impossible image is by having nothing inside of their brains. That's what we're trying to get at from the opening stanza. And of course, that's not necessarily a positive image. or a negative image. I don't really know how to read it yet, but it's an impossible image that she's making possible through the use of imagery. So one of the things that I'm going to try to do now is to think more about cherry picking. So in my next few sentences, I'm going to start focusing on this one, like roadside stray cats. So I want to pull down each and every one of these words if I can and try to make an argument about them. This won't be super clean because I'm going to do this in the process of you sitting here. But so I want to start with this image of roadside stray cats. You know, so when the speaker compares the characters to, you know, roadside stray cats, we focus on, I'm going to cut that, but I don't like that right now. We focus on how these cats, you know, a domesticated pet, but also a relatively dangerous predator, you know, of animals, on how these cats have two different qualifying images. First, they are stray. First, they are strays. They're stray cats, meaning that they have no singular sense, the singular place to belong. They stray. Point. Again, a kind of emptiness, a hollowness, an image of not belonging. Anything up. From there, we learn too that these cats are defined as roadside, meaning that they travel, they move from place to place, always in search of sustenance. My timer for the video. So what I'm doing here, just to clarify before I end this one, is I'm trying to, again, this right here doesn't really connect yet with this up here, so I still need to do a lot of revision work, which I'll do with you on a video to show you how I would actually approach this. But what I am trying to do here is I'm trying to show you how in a poem, right, and then when I'm writing about it, I start with a whole quote, right here, 2 lines, and then at some point I'm down here just talking about one word. When I say cherry picking, that's what I mean, right? I'm not just giving you summary information. I'm trying to dive into the language, you know, that she's using inside of the poem to make an argument as to why those images even belong. And by doing that, I'm getting deeper and deeper into the poem's meaning, and I'm finding some of the crevices. And what's interesting is how much she's talking about hollowness and how much she's showing us hollowness without actually talking about it. So this poem is absolutely about hollowness. It's absolutely about grief. I still think it's about grief, and I still think it's about imaginative coping, but those ideas may change as I continue to work with the poem. But this is very much what a paper for you would look like. The kind of structure I want, which is like pull out direct quotes, look at them closely, make discussions and arguments around the language, work toward a thesis, but also work as you go. So don't think you have to already have an argument. I don't expect your papers to be perfect at all, but I expect you to at least try to dive into images. Be bold, make claims, try to stay within the poem. And let me know if any of this is helping or if you need some kind of different content, and I'll be happy to provide that for you. So more videos are coming, but this will be the last video on Ada Limon, so that you just have this as a working thing. I'm happy to do more if you contact me. I will follow up. Okay, thank you very much. I hope you have a great weekend.